Okay, so let's bring up we had just on Monday, we had started a tshuva where the basic question is, are you allowed to steal something from someone with every intention of returning it, but in order to teach someone a lesson? Okay. The situation was that one of the workers uh, would keep the keys to the safe in an unsafe place out in the open. And so the thinking was, let me teach this guy a lesson. Let me scare the bejesus out of him, as they say, right? And steal the keys. He'll freak out. And then, a day later, we'll let him know, oh, we found the keys. And it was your fault because you left them out and so forth. Okay. So that was the premise of the question. Now, initially, Rav Sharaga had brought from the Shulchan Aruch and from the Sefer Hasidim and from the Chida that you're not allowed to do that. It's that as a matter of fact, our rabbis tell us that if you frighten someone, even to play a practical joke on them, but if it's just to frighten them, you're chayiv b'dinei shamayim. Okay, so that's one indication that it should not be okay to do something like that. However, Rav Sharaga then proceeded to bring two cases from the Gemara where people are taking things in order to test or in order to see, who the person is. The first case we saw is a person whose name was Abba Umna. And Abba Umna was a bloodletter, and people would come to him and he would be visited with the bas kol, with a heavenly voice on a daily basis. And this made Abaya upset because he would only get a heavenly voice once a week. So he wanted to know what's so special about this fellow Abba Umna. So he sent two of his Talmidim. And and then they bump into him in the marketplace later and they say, how much are these worth? We want to sell them. And Abba Umna basically told them this is what they're worth. And they said, well, how do we know? Maybe you're just trying to give us a lowball price so that we sell them back to you. And he said, no, that's what I paid for them. That's what they're worth. And so anyway, and then when they said we were just testing you to see if you're a righteous person, to see how you would react, he said, I refuse to take payment for them. They're your quilts now, and leave me alone, because I had basically given up on them. I made them a gift. So I refused to take them. So this was a sign of his righteousness. So as Rav Sharaga points out, he says, what right did they have to take the quilts without his permission? Despite the fact that it was their intent to return the quilts. He says it could be, since they knew for sure that he wouldn't mind, they knew that he was a righteous person, and their whole intent was for the purpose of a mitzvah. And I guess they anticipated. What did Abba Umna say? He said, I'm not taking the quilts back because I assumed that if you took them, you must have needed them to do a mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim. So it was my contribution to tzedakah. So maybe that's what they assumed all along. The harav ben, which we found to be contrived. We found to be that a difficult answer, because then why test him? If you already know that he's so righteous, then why test him in the first place? The Harav ben Ishchai besifro ben Yehoyada kasav l'tarit shehem lo lokhu et ze beseiter lo lokhu otam b'fnei b'nei habayit v'kulam ro otam shekarchu otam v'lachein ze lo nechshav iser gezel. The ben Ishchai There's a different answer. He says that when they took the quilts, they weren't really stealing them because everybody saw, like, in other words, his kids, this Abu Ummah's kids were up in the morning and they said to the kids, hey, kids, we're going to leave now. We had a great time. Thanks for helping us out. We're going to take these quilts. Just wanted you to know. And so, and then they packed them in their knapsacks. Okay. So then maybe that's why it's not considered to be Gezel. Again, a little bit unsatisfactory. Then we started another Gemara. So let's look at this other Gemara. שמסופר שרב ששס לא היה אוכל אצל הריש קלוסה מפני שהעבדים שלו היו חשודים על איסור איבר מן החי, והריש קלוסה היה אומר שהעבדים שלו לא חשודים. This was the second case. Rav Sheshes didn't trust the kashrus of the exilarch's home because he felt that the people who were working for him were chashud on Ever min hachai. In other words, he felt that these were people who were guilty of eating from a live animal. And the Reish Galusa, the exilarch himself, didn't believe it. He felt that no, they're God-fearing and they wouldn't do that. So Amar Lo Rav Sheshes Shehu Yochiach. Lo Rav Sheshes says, I'm going to have to show you. Oso Hayom Hechinu Shama Eza Keves La'achila. So that day they prepared, a lamb for food. This is what we left with last time. So Rav Sheshes said to one of the attendants, he said, I know you guys just slaughtered a lamb. I really like the leg of lamb. Quietly go and bring me the leg of lamb and I'll roast it myself. So now you only have a lamb with 3 legs, right? Because the guy cut off one of the legs. So he told all of the servants, I guess this was in the presence of the Reish Kalusa, let's take a look at the lamb. Before we roast it, let's take a look at all of you've dismembered it, you're ready to barbecue it or roast it. Let's take a look. So they come and they bring a lamb. All the body parts of the lamb, there's only 3 legs. So he said, where's the 4th leg? Was this a 3-legged lamb to begin with? Maybe it was a treifa. They said, no, it always had 4 legs. So he said, so where's the 4th leg? Amru Kenira Nishar Bamitbach. They said, oh, we must have left it on the counter where we were dismembering the animal. They couldn't find it. Chaschu, so they didn't want to lose face. So chaschu regel shel keves echad shu chai ve'eviu lo es haregel. So they cut off the leg off of a living lamb. They cut its leg off, which obviously is aver min hachai. It's clearly aser min haTorah, even for a non-Jew. And they said, oh, we found the 4th leg. Amru hinei matzanu achshav yesh daled regolim. So hotz raglayim. Hotzihu et haregel shelo kachashamesh shelo va'omer lahem hakeves hazeh chamesh raglayim hayulo. So then then he brings out the leg that he was hiding. He says, oh, you mean this was a 5-legged lamb? So the take of nochach ladas shavadim shelo chashudim alever minachai. This is how he proved to the Reish Galusa that his servants were actually committing this offense. And that's why Rav Sheshes says, you see, that's why I can't eat at your house. It's almost like, if you wanted to play, a guy says, I want you to come over to my house for Shabbat. And the fellow says, but your wife, she's not so frum. I don't trust the kashrus. He says, my wife? I'm sure you can trust the kashrus. And he says, well, I'll teach you a lesson. And he steals the pot of soup and he hides it away or something. And so the thing that was warming up in the oven, she's got to warm it up again. And hey, how did you get this warm stuff? Oh, it was in there from before Shabbos. Oh, really? So then did you warm up too? And he brings out, or whatever scenario you can create for yourself. Okay. So the obvious question is, so the question is, what right did Rav Sheshes have to steal a leg, right? You're not allowed to steal, even if your intention is to return it. The Sefer Kapei Aharon, Kosav Dichadei Lahatzilas Reish Galusa Me'isr Eber Menachai Zemutar. So the Sefer Kapei Aharon writes that in order to save the Reish Galusa from kashrus violations and from eating from non-kosher food, you are allowed to do stuff like this. I mean, I would have just answered that he was doing everything with the permission of the Reish Galusa. It was his lamb, so he was just testing the workers. I don't see there's real Geneva here if he tipped off the Reish Galusa first, but that's apparently not what the way he's understanding the story. Avalafize kasha the hare bezohar hakadosh kasuv sherachel nenshal shelakcha es haterafim milavan ha'arami. Now let's go back to the Bible. Okay, what's the story in the Chumash? Rachel steals her father's terafim, her father's statuettes. Okay, and she hides them because she doesn't want her father to be nichshel in avodah zarah. At least ostensibly, that's the way our sages understand it. Okay, v'garmalot tsar v'lochein mesa tzira. The reason why she died, according to the Zohar, was as a punishment for taking her father's statues. V'imkein kasha halohi ganvas hatraf milovan shelo yavod avodah zarah. She was only taking them from him in order to prevent him from worshiping idols. If your intention is to deprive someone of doing an Aveira, to prevent them from doing an Aveira, it's permitted to steal from them. If that's true, then why would Rachel be punished? You could answer, Lavan wasn't Jewish. Now, Jewish, non-Jewish didn't exist before Matan Torah, but nonetheless, perhaps you could answer that to prevent a Gentile from committing an Isser, you're not permitted to steal for. You're only permitted to steal in order to prevent a Jew from doing an Isser, but you're not permitted to steal in order to prevent a Goy from doing an Isser. Which I find all of this quite interesting to bring a raya from the Zohar. We're starting now to conflate halacha and agada, which is always somewhat speculative. It's always somewhat tentative when you're doing that. So, but in any event, so the Makor Baruch says, "Ein b'shach shepasak she'ein chiyuv la'afrushe mi'isura begoy." The Shach actually teaches us that there's no obligation that I have as a Jew to prevent a non-Jew from doing an Isser. It may be usher for a Gentile to worship idols, but I have no obligation to try and stop him from worshiping idols. Like I don't have to go to the Hindu shrine and hold up a big sign, Goyim, don't worship idols, right? There's no, we have enough troubles, yeah. The Chen Kosef B'shut Chasam Sofer, Uber Dahainu Time of the Dafka B'Yisrael She Arevim Zelazeh. He says the Chasam Sofer says that it's only because Jews are responsible for one another that we have a mitzvah to separate each other from doing the wrong thing, and therefore there may be certain dispensations or leniencies that we can take advantage of in order to fulfill that directive. But that doesn't apply to a non-Jew. Okay, now, that being the case, with this, we can also answer what the Gemara in Brachos says, Sharav Ada bar Ahava ra'a lehahi kutit shalavsha karbalta. There's a story in Maseches Brachos that Rav Ada bar Ahava once saw a woman whom he thought was Jewish, but it turned out she was a Gentile, and she was wearing something called the karbalta, dahainu beged adom shuhulot sanua b'shuk, a very flashy red, like a bright red dress that was very immodest. Okay. Chashav shehi bas Yisrael v'kara la'ezeh. He thought that she was a Jewish girl. So he pulled off this coat off of her. It wasn't a dress. It's not like it's like this skimpy red dress, because then obviously pulling it off of her would not solve the problem. But rather, it must have been some kind of like kimono or something like that. He grabs it from her, rips it, and says, "How dare you wear something so immodest?" Okay, besof nodalo shehikusis vayitzarach l'shalim la'arba me'azuz. Afterwards, he discovered that she was a Gentile, and he realized that he had to compensate her 400 zuz for this expensive kimono that he had torn up. Va'amar maton maton arba mea zuzi shavia. He said, maton maton, which is patience, patience is worth up 400 zuz. In other words, I was impetuous. I was too quick to the trigger. And I should have just been more found out her identity before I did something like that. Mashma shebegoy lo mitzuvim al zeh, aval b'Yisrael afrushim me'isura mutter. So it seems that you're only obligated to prevent a Jew from committing an isser. You're not prevented from stopping a goy from doing an isser. Okay. Now, with all of this said, that's the end of the tshuva. So what it seems is that, I mean, I find this to be somewhat unsatisfactory. Like you're telling me this is the end. I feel that maybe the second story you could wiggle out of, but the first story, which was the story of Abaya's students going to Abba Umna and stealing his quilts to test the guy, is extraordinary. I mean, it seems so clearly indicative over there that sometimes there are dispensations, or to steal, or maybe Abaya was doing something wrong, and similarly, like, what right did Rachel have to steal the truffim from her father? So, but Rav Sharaga is basically, he's already paskin the tshuva at the beginning of the tshuva. His psak is that you're not allowed to steal from someone, even if it's to teach them a lesson. And that seems to be somewhat problematic, because, like, what if this guy's an employee and he could potentially cause the company millions of dollars of loss because of his negligence? And so there's two options. You can either fire the guy, or you can teach him a lesson. So is Rav Sharaga basically saying you're not allowed to teach him a lesson, better that he should get fired, or better that the company should lose millions of dollars? I don't,
It's usually, he'll sort it out by giving both sides of the story,
yeah,
then make a statement.
yeah.
If
He's not doing that here. He's basically abruptly ending the tshuva by, basically saying categorically the Shulchan Aruch paskins you're not allowed to steal from someone, even to teach them a lesson, in order, and you plan to give it back to them. And then, but then he says, well, what are you going to do with the following two stories and the story from the Torah? And he basically says, well, you'll have to answer them this way, or that way. And, but he's holding to this halacha. Okay, this warrants a little bit more research. Maybe I'll take a look at it today. Okay, let's take a look at another tshuva. Shibush bekesef aviv l'tavaso below yediasa. A similar shaila is using your father's assets, like taking cash from your father without his knowledge, in order to help him. Okay, so here's the question. Avinu Adam Mevugar, v'chai levad v'daito tzlula. So our father is an elderly person. He lives alone, but he's still got all his marbles. Ach pe'amim hu oger mazon shehitkalkel v'lo rodze lezorko. But there are times when our father, God bless him, will hold on to food that's already past its expiry date and is gone a little funky. So Aleph, so the first question is, Ha'im mutar lanu lizrok et ha'ochlim o sheyesh bazeh pigia b'kavod avim. Are we allowed to go into his house and throw out the stuff that's already starting to mold? Or is that considered to be an act of disrespect to our father? Beis, anachnu me'unyanim liskor lo dira liyad echat ha'achayot shetetapel bo, v'hu lo me'unyan b'mechir gavoa. Our hope is that we can rent an apartment for our father so that he can live next door to our sister, and she'll be his caregiver. Or at least she'll be able to check in on him on a daily basis. And maybe he lives in a different city and we want to move him. But when we put the proposal to him, he says, no, the rent's too high. I'm in a place where I'm happy. Leave me alone. Okay. Would it be permissible for us to tell him it's the same, or it's even lower rent than what you're currently paying, and then to secretly, surreptitiously take out the money from his bank account without his knowledge? So basically, we want to take money from our father's account. I have certain control of my mother's assets, for example. I would never touch it. But let's say it was for her benefit and she says, no, I don't need it. I don't need it. And she really does need it, is essentially what the question is. Would you be permitted, as assuming you have power of attorney or access to her bank account, would it be permitted to go ahead and take money from that account to help her?
Keep it up, and you're allowed to use their money to do keep it up in?
Well, let's phrase it a little bit different. Is your point is well taken. There is no obligation of kibbut avim with your own money. So if your parent says, I want you to go to the market and buy me groceries, you have a mitzvah to do that, but you're not obligated to spend your own money. You can say, with pleasure, Mom, can I have your credit card? Right.
But here, they're specifically saying that the person does have all the ability to answer these questions.
Yes, but it's not black or white. As people get older, and this, Jovi, as people get older, they do have certain cognitive compromises, so that even though they're perfectly capable of holding a conversation, you can tell that things are starting to decline, and perhaps discretionary issues such as should I throw this away or not, they no longer have real objectivity and critical thinking about those things, and also about this as well. They need to get their father an apartment, and he's very frugal, and his frugality has only amplified as he's gotten older, and he really does need to spend the money on living in a place which is better for him. So that's the whole shaila. Okay, are we allowed to either destroy some of his assets by throwing away food that's spoiled or about to spoil, or are we allowed to take money from his bank account to help him without his knowledge? So what do you say?
Let me break some. Just depends on the detriment and fiscal perspective. If he's going to get sick and we're trying to prevent him from becoming sick, then I think we have an obligation to do that in terms of food. But in terms of the rent, it's not really a matter. It's more for our convenience in a sense. We try to help him, of course, but it's not so clear.
It's not just a matter of convenience. It's not for our convenience. He lives up in Haifa. We're all in Tel Aviv, right?
Issue.
It's just not practical for us to take him to his appointments.
It just becomes a safety issue for him.
And it becomes a safety issue. Like, what if he falls and there's no one there around?
Okay. So that's, I think, go back to safety then. I think it's safety, physical, and mental health. You have no patient to
Step in, but to the point where we can take money out of his bank account.
Again, if it's so gray that he's on the cognitive end, that he can't appreciate that.
It's not so pashut, right? It's not so pashut. Okay, so let's take a look at how this tshuva begins. Okay, be'inyan hamazon hamikukal. So regarding spoiled food, pashut shemuter lizrok ezeh kedei shahamazon hamikukal lo yazik lo. As far as the spoiled food, that's more obvious that it's permissible to throw away that food so that he doesn't get sick from it, like Joby was saying. The reason why you're not stealing from dad is because any person who eats food that is bad for them is in violation of the halacha of the Torah. You have to preserve your health. And therefore, va'adam shechoti b'mamono mitzvah la'abedis mamono kedei lahafrisho mehachet. If a person is sinning with his assets, it's a mitzvah to destroy those assets to prevent him from sinning. Kemosha asasa Rachel imenu latrafim shel aviha, like Rachel did with her father's statues. So he's bringing an example from Rachel, whereas even though in the previous tshuva, he brought from Rachel that she was committing a sin. So make up your mind, Rav Shiraga. Like which one is it? Can you bring a raya from Rachel that she was acting virtuously, or was she committing a sin? Here he's saying no, she acted virtuously. Destroy a person's assets in order to prevent them from sinning. I just had this image of going into every single household in our community. It's Rabbi Korobkin here. I'd like to see what you have in your cabinets. Potato chips, candy, cookies. I'm confiscating all of these things and donating them to charity. No. I don't want to hear anything. This is my duty as your rabbi. I'm preventing you from sinning. How do you think that's going to go over? Okay. So anyway, Ve'en kan Isser baltashchis. There's no Isser of baltashchis, of destroying things wantonly. Ki asur lo lahashchis is gufo yoser mimasha asur lahashchis is mamono. Because it is more of a baltashchis to harm your body than it is a baltashchis to throw away food. In both cases, you're being destructive. So which is the lesser of two evils? It's better to destroy food that's bad for you than to destroy your body. So, I mean, if a person just takes this in a vacuum and doesn't have proper discretion, they can say, well, I was doing a mitzvah. I took away your candy because you were killing yourself, because you're a diabetic. I mean, I could definitely hear this if a person's a diabetic, for example, and they insist on eating sweets. I can clearly see that I can confiscate their stuff because it's really bad for them. Or let's say to steal someone's cigarettes, right? Because they continue smoking and they've developed emphysema or something, whatever it is. Okay. Anyway, this is not so pashut. This is not so pashut. Anyway, so ayin lo Rabbeinu Hagona mechaber shlita b'shut baruch omer shehevi mashikosav b'zohar hakadosh parshas vayetze da'afal pisha rachel ganvas atraf me'avia k'dei l'nos ha'miser avodah zara mikol makom hinensha. So here the Makor Baruch brings that Rachel was punished. So how can you bring a raya, a proof from Rachel that you're acting virtuously, when the Zohar says that she committed a sin. All right, let's look at this in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.